Hey guys, welcome to the notes for writing point-slope equations. We are now in Unit 3B. Our essential question is, why are multiple representations important? So we have talked about point-slope form before because we already know how to graph them, but now we're going to be writing their equation. So instead of using the equation to graph, now we're going to create an equation based off some information that we're given. So don't get scared because of all the words on the notes. It's not going to be that overwhelming. It's just you're going to take bits and pieces from the problem and create your equation from that. So our essential question is, why are multiple representations important? Again, we learned three different types of forms, right? We learned slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and standard form. And so sometimes some forms are easier to use than others. So for point-slope form, we're going to review that is going to be y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, point-slope form is called point-slope form because there is a point and a slope present. It gives us those two things. So the slope is represented by the m here, so this is our slope. Okay, and then the point would be these two guys here. And you want to make sure that it's always x comma y. So this one would be x1 comma y1. Okay, now the key thing to remember about your point here is that the equation and the point themselves, they have opposite signs. So you want to make sure you don't accidentally leave the sign the way it is. So if I have like a -3 in the parentheses, when I take it out, it'll be +3. So you have opposite signs. So it's called point-slope form because there's a point and a slope. Okay, so you can use this formula to write an equation of any line as long as you have two things. So it is called point-slope form because you need two things. You need a point and a slope. Now you can write any equation as long as you have those two things. So the first thing I would need is the slope. And the second thing I would need is a point. But really, I can have any point that's on that line. So any point on the line. Okay? Okay, so we're going to start now. Now we always start off a little bit easier and then it will build on itself. So with number 1, we have write an equation of the line that passes through the point 3, 2 and has a slope of -6 in point-slope form. Well, what form does it want me to write it in? In point-slope form. Now you have to make sure you read very carefully. And I know you don't like to read, but you gotta read because it will tell you the information that it wants. It wants us to write an equation in point-slope form. It's not asking for the point, it's not asking for the slope, it's asking for an equation in point-slope form. Well, let me go ahead and write down the point-slope form equation just so that we have it for reference. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, well, it's called point-slope because I need two things, a point and a slope. And remember, I can have any point. Does the problem give me a point? Yes, it says it has the point 3, 2. So my point is 3, 2. Does it give me a slope? Yes, it gives me the slope of -6. So slope is -6, okay? Now, in order to write point-slope form, I need those two things. So now I'm just going to plug those into my formula. Well, remember your point is your x1, y1. Okay? X always comes first, independent then dependent. And then our slope is our m. Now, I know you might want to write it as -6 over 1, but that's only really useful when we're graphing. Because when we're graphing, we want rise and a run, but you don't really have to write -6 over 1 when we're just writing equations because it's not really helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the equation. You just plug in this information into the equation. So you have y, and then you want to do the y1. Well, what is our y1 going to be? Over here, it's +2. So when I plug it into the equation, it's going to be -2. Equals, what's our slope? Our slope here is -6. We're plugging in. So I'm color coding to hopefully have you understand where I'm getting these bits and pieces from. Then we have our parentheses, x, and then we need to plug in our x1. Well, what is our x1? Our x1 is 3. But it was 3 when I, oh gosh. What happened to my x? Okay, sorry. Our x1 is 3. It's a +3 in the point, but when I plug it into the equation, it's going to have the opposite sign. So now it's going to be -3, okay? So did we do what the question asked? Well, the question asked, write an equation in point-slope form. That's what I did, so I'm done. Let me go ahead and move this down. Okay, so that is it. We did what we were supposed to do. Now, number one is always pretty easy, so don't get too comfortable, but if you're given a point and a slope, then you can automatically just plug it into the formula for point-slope form, okay? All right, moving on to number 2. Write an equation of the line that passes through the points negative 5, 0 and 5, 4 in point-slope form. Again, I want this in point-slope form. It tells me what form, because sometimes it might ask you for a different form. So this is point-slope form. Again, I'm going to write this here just so I have it for reference. Okay? So, in point-slope form, I need two things. I need a point and I need a slope. Okay? But what does the problem actually give me? It gives me 2 points. And you're like, okay, well, it doesn't even matter, right? Because I need any points. So I really only need one of those points for my equation. However, I don't have the slope. But do we know how to find the slope given 2 points? Yes, we know how to find the slope from 2 points. So let me go ahead and write my 2 points down. I have 5, 4, and I have negative 5, 0. So I'm given the points negative 5, 0 and 5, 4. Okay. I'm given 2 points there. Now I want to find the slope between these two because it doesn't give me the slope. So I need the slope. Let me go ahead and change this to a different color. So we're going to find our slope now. Now remember, the slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So the first thing when I want to find slope is label my points. So my first point I'm going to label as x1, y1. Okay, and then the second point, yes, it's an x and a y, but I want to label it different. So this is x2, y2. So it's my first set of points and then my second set of points. Okay, so then I would have, my y2 would be 0 minus 4. And make sure you're using parentheses when you're plugging in that second number, over your x2, which is negative 5, minus your x1, which is 5. So again, we should be very comfortable finding slope at this point because we've been doing this for a while. Okay? So now what do I do? Let's simplify. 0 minus 4 is going to be negative 4. And then negative 5 minus 5 is going to be negative 10. But before I stop here, I want to make sure it's simplified, right? So negative 4 divided by negative 10 is going to be a positive number because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So you can't just say positive 4 over 10. You still need to check if it can be simplified any further. And that's when your calculator can help you and come into play. So if you put 4 over 10 in the calculator and ask it to turn into a fraction and simplify it for you, you're going to end up with positive 2 over 5. Okay, so you have positive 2/5. Now, is that the answer to my question that they asked for? No. It asked us to write an equation. All we've done is found the slope, so we can't stop yet because that's not what they asked for. We found the slope, which is good, so we have one piece of the information. But now I need to pick a point. So does it matter what point I pick? And you're like, yes, no, I don't know. And it does not matter what point you pick. So I'm going to pick, I'm going to actually do both points in this instance, but it does not matter, really, I promise. It does not matter what point you pick because you will get the same result. So let's go ahead and write down our 2 points. So we have the point negative 5, 0. So we did that one in pink. And then the other point will be 5, 4. So we have 2 points, correct? Now, it doesn't matter which one I choose. I just have to choose one of them. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do both examples with you. So we want to plug it into the formula. Okay? So we're going to start with this formula here. So we have y, and then we want to plug in our y1 next. Our y1 in this case, remember, this is x1, y1. That's our point. So we're doing the pink point first. So our y1 in this case is 0. So we can either put minus 0 or plus 0. It doesn't matter because they actually equal the same thing, right? If I add 0 and I subtract 0, it has no effect. So you can either put a plus or a minus. And actually, this should be pink because that's from our point. And then equals, well, what's our m value? Well, m is our slope. When we found it earlier, it was 2/5. Okay? Parentheses x, and then I need to do the x1. Well, the x1 here is negative 5. But when I take negative 5 and I plug it in, it's going to change signs and become positive 5. Okay? Whoops. Plus 5. Okay, so what's happening here? Okay, we took our point and then we took our slope. So this one was more work than the first one because we weren't already given the slope. Here we need to find the slope. So here I have one point slope equation. So let's try to do the other one. Okay, well, I would start the same thing. I would have y, and then what's my y1 here? Well, remember x1, y1. And if you're thinking about the x1 and y1 here, this was for when we were finding slope. So those are irrelevant now. Like we don't even care about what we were labeling those earlier. So when you pick a point, you have to stick with that point. So if I pick -5, 0, then those are the only two numbers that I'm plugging into this equation. But if I'm going to plug 5, 4 in, then those are the only numbers I plug in. So now I'm going to do the other way. Instead of picking the other point, I'm going to pick this point. My y1 here is +4, but when I plug it into the equation, it's going to be -4. Now, why am I plugging in the 4? Because that's my y value. The y's go together, and then the x's go together. Equals your m. So I'm just going to make sure I'm going to write this here so we can have that for reference. Okay. Our m here is going to be our slope, which is 2/5. And then parentheses, we have our x, and then we have our x1. Remember, see how x's go together and y's go together? So just make sure that you're picking the right value. So you want to make sure you pick the x1 here. Well, x1 is +5. But when you plug it in, it's going to be -5. Okay, and then you make sure you close those parentheses. So you actually have two equations here. You can either have this one, or you can have this one. Does it matter? Nope. On my answer key, I'm going to have both of these equations. And you're like, well, they don't even look the same, so how do I even know that they're both correct? Well, let's graph it really quick in decimals. Y minus 0 equals 2/5. Is it 2/5? Yes, 2/5 x plus 5. So this was the very first equation that we created. It's the one on the right, on the left with the pink. So that's the pink one that I just graphed. So it's graphed it for us. And then the second equation was y minus 4. Was it minus 4? Sorry. Yeah, it was minus 4. Y minus 4 equals 2/5 x minus 5. So I have a blue line and a green line, and I'm going to go ahead and tap back and forth. And what do you notice? They're the exact same line. So it doesn't matter what point you pick. It doesn't, and you only need to pick one. So if you want to pick the -5, 0 point, then do that one, and that's your answer. Or if you want to do the 5, 4 point, you can do that one, and then that's your answer. Regardless, you just need to pick one, and that needs to be your answer. Okay, moving on. Number 3, write an equation of the line in point slope form given f of 1 equals -9 and f of 4 equals -21. So here, these are points in disguise, right? It just didn't say that. So if I have f of x, right, and then I have f of 1, what's the difference between this? Well, I plugged in a 1 for my x value. So remember, this just means that you have a 1 for your x value. So for my point, my x value will be 1, and the y value will be -9. Okay? The other point is going to be 4, -21. Okay? So those are my x values. They're just points in disguise. Now what do? Pretty much the same thing you did in the last problem. We first need to find our slope. So I forgot to actually highlight point slope form here. So we want point slope form because it says that, and we need to find that. So let me go ahead and write that down. And you don't have to write it down on every problem. I'm just writing it down so that we have it for reference. Let's go ahead and find our slope first. So m equals, now let's go ahead and label x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay? Now I have -9 minus -21 in parentheses, right? The minus here comes from the formula. Over your x2, which is 1, minus 4 in parentheses. And again, that's just the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, that's going to simplify. I'm going to get +12 over -3. Let me just double check that also. Yeah. And does that simplify? Well, we always want to check if it does, and it does in this case, and that equals -4. So what does that mean? Is that my answer? No. That means that my slope is -4. But it's not my answer, so I don't want to quite box my answers yet because I know I'm not done. Well, what do I need to do now? I need to pick a point. And again, it doesn't matter which point I pick. So I can either pick 1, -9, or I can pick 4, -21. I'm going to go ahead and pick 1, -9. Okay, so I'm going to pick my point, and I'm going to pick my slope. Well, I can't pick my slope. I already have my slope, right? My slope is -4. My point and my slope. So let's go ahead and plug it into the formula up ahead. So the first thing is the y minus, and you want to plug in your y1. So x1, y1. And don't confuse that with these, right? Because those aren't relevant anymore. That was just to find slope, so that doesn't even matter. All right, so my y1 would be here in this case -9, but when I plug it into the equation, it's going to become +9. So let's get rid of that minus sign. So +9 equals my slope, because m is next. My m is -4, because that's my slope. And then I have open parentheses, x, and then I have my x1. Well, what is my x1 in this case? It's a +1 in the point, but when I plug it into the equation, it's an opposite, so -1. Okay, so again, it just needs a lot more you need practice is what you need. It just depends because, wow, that made no sense. You really just need practice with this. It's just some getting used to it. It's something new and different, and we haven't really done it before, so that's why it's just a little more trickier. So this would be my answer. And you could also have the other. So you could have also chosen 4, -2, and 4, -21. And if you did, the equation would be y plus 21 equals -4, x minus 4. I didn't do this one, but again, it doesn't matter what point you pick, because I showed you that when we graph them, it doesn't matter, and it's the same thing. Okay, moving on. So number 4 is a two-part question. So it says, Dylan is losing $53 per day. On day 5, he had $434 left. Sorry, I read that wrong. On day 5, he had $434 left. Write an equation in point-slope form to model the situation. So we're given some information here, but we need to actually dissect it and see what information they actually gave us. So usually if it's talking about point-slope form, they either gave you a point and a slope, or they gave you 2 points and you have to find the slope. So let's figure out what they gave us. First, it says we're losing $53, or Dylan is losing $53 per day. So Dylan is losing $53 per day. And then it says on day 5, he had $434 left. Well, it looks to me that they gave us a point and a slope. And here's why I think that. If Dylan is losing $53 per day, that means every single day he's losing $53, like every single time, every single day. And if he's losing that every day, that's our rate of change, right? A rate of change, which is slope, remember, if you go back to Unit 3A, rate of change means slope. And our slope is constant, and you're changing, it's a constant change. And every single day, he's losing $53. The key word to tell me that this is a slope is the per. Per tells me that it's each day, or per day. That's going to tell me slope. So that means my slope is going to be 53. Now, would it be positive 53 or negative 53? And I'm going to say negative 53 because you're losing $53 per day. So your slope here is negative 53. And because it gave you a slope, then it must have given you a point as well. So I know that I'm going to have a point in this one. Okay. Now it says on day 5, he had $434 left. Now there are 2 ways that I've seen this problem written, or this point written, okay? And these are the 2 ways that I normally see it written. I either see 5, 434 or 434, 5. Okay, now you're comparing days and you're comparing money. Now, days is time, right? So anytime we have hours, seconds, minutes, days, anything like that, or years, that's time. And time is always independent, always. Time is independent, which means it's always our x value. So in this case, days is our x. So the point that's correct is the 5, 434. The money depends on the time. So our point is 5, 434. Because we have days and then we have money, okay? So we have a point and a slope, so now I can write the equation in point-slope form. Because I don't have to find the slope, they already gave it to me. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in, so I have y, Okay, and then I have my y1, so make sure we label this here so we know what our y1 is. So x is always first and then y. Our y1 in this case is 434, but because it's opposite signs, we want to make sure we do minus 434. Okay. Equals our slope. Our slope here was negative 53 because he's losing $53 per day, parentheses x, and then we have x1. Well, our x1 here is positive 5, but when we plug it in, it'll be opposite signs, so it'll be minus 5. Okay, and that is our equation. Now, we have how many days will it take for Dylan to run out of money? Well, let's go ahead and look at this. So this is an extension of the problem ahead. So Dylan is slowly losing money, right? He's losing $53 per day. Well, we want to figure out on what day will he run out of all his money or when he has nothing left. Now, we want to find a point, basically. So we have a point, and it's x comma y, okay? We have x, y, but we don't know. Now, which one of these represents the days? Does x represent the days, or does y represent the days? Okay, the x would represent the days. So what would the y represent? That would be your money, right? That's how much money that Dylan has left. So on a certain amount of days, that's how much money it has left. Just like the point here. On day 5, he has $434 left. Okay? But what is the problem asking for? Well, it says how many days. So do we know days? We don't. That's a question mark for us because we're like, we don't know how many days, okay? But it says for him to run out of money. If he doesn't have any money, if he runs out of it, how much money does he have left? 0. So we have 0 money left. Well, what does that mean? That means I'm looking for x, but I know that y is going to be 0, right? Because we have a y for the 0 value. So using the equation that we had earlier, so let me go ahead and copy that equation down. Y minus 434 equals negative 53 times x minus 5. Using this equation, I'm going to figure out how many days it's going to take for Dylan to run out of money. But I need to use this information to help me. Where am I going to plug in a 0 here? Am I going to plug it in for x, or am I going to plug it in for y? I'm going to plug in a 0 for my y value because that's where the 0 is. So if I go over here to this equation, I'm going to plug in a 0 for the y value. And what am I solving for then? Well, if I plug in a 0 for the y, then I'm solving for x. I'm looking to see what my x value is going to be. Well, 0 minus 434 is just negative 434. So now our goal is to solve for x, because what does x represent? X represents the days, because we're trying to figure out how many days it's going to take for him to run out of money. That's why we put in a 0 for the y, because y was money. Okay, so the first thing in order to get x by itself is I need to distribute and simplify this first. So this would be negative 53x, and then negative 53 times negative 5 is going to be positive 265, and then the left side stays the same. Okay, my next step here is I'm going to, again, we want x by itself, so I'm going to go and subtract 265, okay, because that's what's attached over there. So 265, well, we have negative 434 minus 265. That's going to be negative 699 equals negative 53x. Again, I still want my x value by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 53 to get the x alone. Equals, so x equals, so it looks like I got a giant decimal in my calculator, so I'm going to round to 13.19. So what does that mean? Well, x represents our days, right? That's what we were looking for. So that means that in 13 days, Dylan's going to run out of money. So in 13 days, let's go ahead and round that. Is one of those problems that we just kind of made up, so that's why there's a decimal as the answer. But again, what were we solving for? We were looking for how many days will he run out of money. So we were looking for, well, it's going to take 13 days to run out of money because running out of money means you have $0 left. All right, next question is, a new bakery sold 42 cookies on the first day. and every day after that, it sold 30 more cookies. Write an equation in point slope form modeling the number of cookies the bakery sold. Okay, so we know what we wanted in point slope form, and like always, I'm going to go ahead and write down point slope form for us so that we have it to reference. Okay, well, again, if it's a word problem, it's probably either giving you 2 points or it's giving you a point and a slope. So let's go ahead and figure out what they gave us. The first bit of information they gave us was that they sold 42 cookies on the first day. So it looks like we're talking about days and we're talking about cookies. So after each day, we'll sell a certain amount of cookies kind of thing. So it looks like we got a point here because it's talking about two different things. Now the question is, would I have 42, 1 or would I have 1, 42? Okay, well, again, we have days and we have cookies. Which one of these is independent? Days is independent because days is time, and time is always your x value. So our days would be our x value, so we would have 1, 42 as our point. The next bit of information is that every day after that, it sold 30 more cookies. So every single day after, they're selling 30 more cookies. And then the next day, they sell 30 cookies. And then the next day, they sell 30 more cookies. This is a constant rate of change, right? Now, rate of change means slope. So that means that every single day after that, you're selling 30 more cookies. 30 is our slope. So m equals 30. That's what our slope represents, is m. Or slope is represented by m. So let's go ahead and plug this into our equation. Because we have a point and a slope, we're good. We didn't even have to find the slope because they gave it to us. So then we have y, and then y1. So our y1 here, can remember because we have x1, y1. Our y1 here would be positive 42. So when we plug it in, it's going to be negative 42. Equals our slope, which is 30. And it would be positive 30 because that store is selling an extra 30 every single day. So they're gaining how much they're selling. And then we have parentheses x minus x1. Our x1 here is 1, so when I plug it in, it will be a negative 1. And that is my equation. Oh gosh. There we go. Okay, last question. Max is 782 miles away after 6 hours. After 10 hours, he is 522 miles away. Write an equation in point-slope form to model the situation. Again, we want it to be in point-slope form, so I will help and go ahead and write that down for reference for us. Okay, now the first bit of information was that it said Max is 782 miles away after 6 hours. Okay, so now we're talking about miles and we're talking about hours. So it looks like it gave us a point here after 782 miles after 6 hours. And this would be 6, 782 because hours is time, right? So hours is always going to be your x. Just because 782 comes first in your sentence does not mean that you get to put 782 first as your point, okay? That does not what that means, or it is not what that means. After 10 hours, he is 522 miles away, okay? Well, this one's going to be 10 hours, 522. So 10 is our x, and then our y value is going to be 522 because time is x and time was hours here. So we have our 2 points. So it didn't look like it gave us a slope, and we're going to have to find the slope. So let's go ahead and find our slope. x1, y1, x2, y2. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so our y2 here was 522 minus 782. And again, it doesn't matter what points you label which, right? So like if you want to label the first one x2, y2, and the second one x1, y1, it doesn't matter. And we've talked about that when we went over slope. And then x2 would be 10 minus 6. And if I simplify this, let's put this in the calculator, 522 minus 782, that's going to be negative 260. And then 10 minus 6 is going to be 4. And we always want to make sure that that is simplified. So negative 260 divided by 4 is going to be negative 65. So that means my slope is negative 65. Well, did the problem ask me to only find the slope? Nope. It wanted me to find the point-slope equation. So now you can decide what point you want to pick. I'm going to go ahead and pick the first one, the first point, which is 6, 782. So it doesn't matter what point I decide to pick. And then my slope was negative 65. Yeah, let's go ahead and just erase that. We know the slope's negative 65, right? I have it over there. So let's go ahead and plug it into our equation. Again, it doesn't matter what point you pick. You just have to pick one and stick to it. So if you want to pick the 10, 522, you can pick that as well. So we have y, and then our y1 here is going to be 782, but it's going to be negative 782 when I put it in the formula because the signs change. Equal our m value. Our m is our slope, and that's going to be negative 65, which is what we found in the baby blue over there. And we have x, and then our x1, which is going to be negative 6. Okay, so I would say, do you have any questions? But you're looking at me through a screen, so you can't really ask a question, I guess. All right, so that would be one of your equations if you decided to choose that point. If you decided to choose the other point, then you would have y minus 522 equals negative 65 times x minus 10. So this is also an acceptable equation if you decide to choose that one. Okay, and then our last question for the notes is how many miles was he when he started the trip? So I'm going to start this just like the way I started that one problem with the with Dylan losing his money. So it's asking a follow-up question, so I know that's probably asking for some information. So let's do x comma y again. Okay, well, what does our x represent in this problem? Well, when I made the 6 comma 782, what did the 6 represent? The 6 was 6 hours, so that means that my x values are my hours. Okay, and then my y values was how many miles I was away, so y is going to be in the miles. Well, it says how many miles. So do I know the miles? I don't, right? I don't know the miles. So miles is question mark. But then it says when he started the trip. Well, when you start a trip, how many hours have you gone? You've gone 0 hours. So we're basically finding the y-intercept here. So on the last problem, we were kind of finding the x-intercept, right? Because it's number comma 0. But here we're finding the y-intercept because it's 0 comma number. We're searching for our y, but we know that when we start, our hours was 0. So we're going to plug in a 0 for the x value. So let's go ahead and copy our equation down. I'm going to copy down the one that we created together here. So y minus 782 equals negative 65 times x minus 6. Okay. Now what do I do next? Well, I need to plug in a 0 somewhere, but where do I plug in that 0? Well, the 0 is in for the x value, right? It's x comma y. The 0 is in for x, which means I need to plug in a 0 for my x value over here. So I have y minus 782 equals negative 65 times 0 minus x, or 0 minus 6. So now we're going to solve this like an equation, just like the last one. So the first thing I would do here is let's simplify. What's 0 minus 6? Well, that's just negative 6, right? So I have negative 65. 0 minus 6 is just negative 6. Now we want to simplify this before we keep going. So negative 65 times negative 6 is going to give us a number. So let's go ahead and do that in the calculator. Negative 65 times negative 6. That's going to be positive 390. Okay. Now we want to go ahead and get the y by itself. So the next step here would be to add 782 to both sides. Okay, so y equals 1,180, oh no, 180, 72. 1,172. Well, what does that answer mean? Well, the y was the miles. That means that he started 1,172 miles away. So he's getting closer and closer. However, he started really far. Okay, so that's basically how you do point slope. Again, you just need a point and a slope, and if you don't have the slope, you find it by using your 2 points. If you have any questions, please feel free to come in for tutoring and ask for help.